Welcome everybody to this Just Chatting podcast, part of the Nerds Chatting Network. My name is Nate, and on this episode I speak to Wyatt, an elementary school teacher who in his spare time creates music. Wyatt tells me about his love of The Expanse, Invincible, and the inspiration for his musical creations.
It's recording now. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Is it really early for you now?
No, it's 10. It's Saturday, so that's earlier than I usually get up. Not this isn't usually earlier than I usually get up, so it's definitely not. But yeah, Saturdays I still wake up pretty early because I've got a 3-year-old, so he doesn't let us sleep in too late.
Right. We've never met. We've spoken a little bit on social media, so these are fresh to me, these answers. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about yourself. Where you're from, how old you are, what you do for a living, basically your name as well. That would help the listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Wyatt. I am 30 years old. I'm in Fresno, California in the States. I am born and raised here. And for a living, a lot of people actually don't know this on Twitter, I realize, because I know, like you said, we know each other from Twitter, and a lot of what I do on Twitter is promoting music that I make, because in my spare time, I do a lot of like electronic music or instrumental music, but by day, I'm actually an elementary school teacher, so I teach fourth grade.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah,
Okay, that's very cool. Yeah, I didn't know that either. So a lot of my questions are probably going to sort of lean into the music stuff and some of
yeah.
your interests. But tell me about teaching. How long have you been teaching? When did that start? Why did you go into it teaching?
Yeah, so I've been teaching now for about 7 years. Did a little bit of teaching in second grade and then went to fourth grade after that, and I've been in fourth grade for about 6 years. And yeah, I'm like a lot of people, I'm sure, through high school and even junior high, I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do, and music's always been a big part of my life and was playing music, but I never really thought of that as a career path because I wanted something with some stability. So I was trying to figure out what else I would want to do, and ended up, my wife is actually a teacher as well, and since she's a little kid, she's always known that she's wanted to teach and be a teacher. So because we were dating in high school, I just naturally kind of took a lot of the same classes as her, and wanting to be around her. And then through high school and eventually really once we got into college, I started to really start to value just the field of education and what it really meant, and how valuable of a job it is. And that just kind of grew in me over time to the point where I now really view teaching and education as something that's a very worthwhile job to have. In the other jobs I had when I was younger before I became a teacher, they were fine, but they were always just a job that I was doing to get paid, and I was never really passionate about it. And teaching is something that, at the end of the day, when I go home, whether I'm exhausted or if it's been a hard day or whatever, I know that it was work that really matters and work that I can be proud of doing.
Yeah, I imagine you go home exhausted more often than not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's fourth graders are 9 and 10, and
Right, okay.
it is a challenging job for sure. But that's part of what I like about it, is that it's rare that I'm doing the exact same thing every day, because even year to year, the kids are so unique and so different that I've got to kind of constantly reinvent the wheel and come up with new ways to approach similar topics and ways to connect with them. And that's part of the fun of it. I think that in a lot of ways, for a while I thought of my doing music and the creative stuff that I do as sort of separate from teaching, but I think there's a lot of creativity in teaching, and a lot of improvising, and a lot of those same types of skills go into that. And it's something that I've really, really come to be passionate about.
Do you have a very set curriculum that you have to teach, or are you able to tailor some of the topics, or sorry, tailor some of the skills that you have to teach around topics that you might be interested in? So I don't know, for example, would you ever do anything with a comic book or anything sci-fi in there to teach kids about literacy or anything like that?
Yeah, it's for the most part, we definitely do have a curriculum that we stick to. When I started teaching, though, we're kind of in a weird phase where in California and just in the country, really, we're kind of adopting new standards with Common Core and things like that. And so there's a lot of kind of experimentation going on and how we teach and the way that we introduce topics. So my first few years of teaching, even though we had a curriculum, there's definitely encouragement to, branch out and do things in a more creative way. So that was a really interesting way to begin my teaching career, because it was where I was kind of learning the ropes with not as much strict guidelines. So with fourth grade, there's not as many opportunities for me to introduce like a lot of, comic books or sci-fi and some of the types of nerd culture things, I guess, that I'm passionate about. But it's a really great way that I'm able to connect with my students,
Sure.
just over pop culture through, before and after school or at recess time, when we get to just kind of hang out and not have to worry about the schoolwork part of it. And so it's been a nice thing to be able to, when Avengers Endgame came out, I think there was like 5 or 6 of my students who were big Marvel fans, just like me, and they were like rushing to the class in the morning to talk to me about it. And I think they got to go to the midnight screening before me, and I was like, "You're not allowed to talk to me. You can't say anything."
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned earlier you're married and you've got a little one.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about that. So you met your wife at school. So how old is your kid?
So he's 3. Yeah, my wife and I met when we were in junior high, really, and we were friends for a while in junior high, and then eventually started dating when we were 15 in high school. And so we're just now coming up on the anniversary where we're both going to be 30, so we'll have been with each other for more time than we were when we were not with each other in our lives.
Wow, that's very cool.
15 years. So yeah, we got married a few years after high school, and then just 3 years ago had our first child. Most likely our only child. That's a topic of debate between us sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah.
Dare I go into that minefield of a conversation?
But yeah, we had our son. His name's Grayson. 3 years ago, and yeah, he's this year just starting a preschool. So that's been a big milestone. But yeah, that's been definitely the most exciting journey I think I've been on is these past 3 years being a dad for the first time.
Sure. And Grayson, is there any nerd reference there?
Oh yeah, definitely. So there's multiple reasons. My dad's name is Gary, and I really liked the idea of my son having the same initials as my dad, so that was a plus. But definitely it was an Invincible reference of, we weren't exactly big fans of the name Mark. It just sounded a little fun.
Okay, yeah.
That's not the most unique. So I was pretty easy to convince the Grayson aspect of it to cover the whole Grayson family.
Okay, so that's a very nice segue into some nerd culture conversations to talk about sort of how, like we said, how you and I have got to know one another on social media. And let's start with Invincible. So you guys know, the guys over at the Invincible podcast?
Yes.
So talk to me about your interest in comics there and where that started and what the things that you really love, like the different types of things you love.
Sure, yeah. So I've been reading comics off and on really since I was really little. I remember I think one of the things that I remember us bonding on Twitter over is you had tweeted out there was a picture of the Ben Reilly Spider-Man, and we were talking about how that for some reason is such a great and iconic like costume from my childhood, the Ben Reilly Spider-Man costume. So those were the first comics that I had ever really started reading as a kid, and
it gets panned, man. It hurts that era of Spider-Man gets hurt. So
I'm still a little bitter over the fact that suit is not included in the PS4 Spider-Man game. Of all the costumes, how can that one not be there? But yeah, so that was some of my first comics when I was a kid, and then read superhero comics off and on. But it wasn't really until like the first Iron Man movie and there was all the tease of like, oh, they're going to build up to an Avengers movie, that I really started diving into the more like complexities of comics and crossovers and team ups and stuff like that, and really got into, Marvel and DC around that time. But eventually I kind of it was frustrating seeing like the the artist change or the writer change, and then it felt like it was a different book, even though I wanted to follow the same characters. So that eventually led me to like reading some other comics like The Walking Dead, and eventually back to Invincible, where because that is one writer the whole time, and for the most part one artist the whole time, it just felt like such a well told story that I just really just fell in love with it. And I don't think I've read a superhero comic that really tops it since.
Yeah, I know, and I don't know if you know my colleague Ben over at Nerds Chatting
Yeah.
is so deeply in love with Invincible and just in the same way, and I agree. It's that joking tagline, the greatest comic book in the universe, but
Yeah.
it actually is. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It is. It's fantastic.
yeah. So, okay, the other thing that I couldn't help but notice on your Twitter feed is about The Expanse.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's a
I know. And
sci-fi link there, right?
yes, absolutely. So yeah, and I've always been like a big science fiction fan. Like Star Wars was, I think, my real first introduction into nerd culture when I was a little kid, and my parents got me I think we rented the VHSs from Blockbuster and watched them, and I've just been kind of addicted to that genre ever since. And The Expanse, I remember I had it was just a time that we were at Barnes and Nobles, we're looking at books and stuff, and I had picked up one of the books because it looked interesting, and decided to start reading the series, and then eventually later on found out they were making a TV show out of it. So I had gone back to I think I had read the first book, but kind of put it down or had gotten distracted and didn't end up finishing them. But when I heard they were making the TV series, I decided to pick them up again and just binge through all of the books really quickly and just fell in love with it, much the same way that I did with Invincible. Like a lot of times when people talk to me about what are the like more underrated properties that I would recommend to them that they might not know about, I usually immediately say Invincible and The Expanse. Like those are the two that that more people should enjoy and talk about. And then when the show came, it was just it's different than the books, but it's just as good in kind of its own way. And it's so grounded in like realism, and it really makes you feel like this is where humanity might be in a couple hundred years, and it carries with it the same kinds of social problems that we have today, and does such a good job of commenting on things going on today without feeling heavy-handed,
Yeah.
that it's just really refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I regret to admit to you that I've binged season one. I was off work for a few days. I was ill, and I was like, right, I'll just give The Expanse a go because I hear it's quite good. And it was just,
Yeah,
boom, 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 all the way through season one. And I haven't had a chance to go back to season two yet. And I have got
yeah,
book one sat on my bookshelf as well
nice.
to read. But I found out what we would call a boot sale, but you might call like a yard sale.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, someone was selling it, so I was like, okay, I'll give that a go. So I
yeah.
intend to read it, but yeah, your recommendation carries weight with it, so I
That's great.
should
Yeah.
look into that.
No, yeah, it's fantastic, and I'm always wary to even recommend it to the show to people at first, because I do feel like it builds kind of slowly at the beginning, in the same way that like Game of Thrones has to, introduce you to 7 different lands and different people and names and things like that. I feel like The Expanse kind of does a lot of world building early on that it takes a little while to get going. So the fact that if you're in on season one, it very much just increases in scope and scale and the pace of things in the second and third seasons. I feel like the third season is the best it's been ever, and I can't wait for it to come back for season 4. So you'll definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, enough about stuff that we're interested in as hobbies. Tell me some more about your music, because that's like if I land on your Twitter page, like it's just your music everywhere, right? You've got your
Yeah,
SoundCloud on there, you're on Spotify. So tell me about where this comes from, why you do it, what you do it for. Tell me all about it.
yeah, yeah. So uh, when I first started, I mean, kind of getting interested in playing music when I was probably like late elementary school, early junior high, and my older brother played guitar, my cousin played guitar, and they were always in bands, and that was just something that seemed like the coolest thing ever. So naturally, if they played guitars, I had to learn how to play the drums. So I started taking some drum lessons, eventually got a drum set, and now being a father myself, I like recognize how much of a sacrifice my parents must have made to buy a 13-year-old kid a drum set, because
Sure.
that must have just been agony throughout the weekends of me banging on the drums in the garage and causing a bunch of noise. Um, but yeah, and so throughout high school, I was in, just different bands with friends where we would make, different, whether it was like pop punk music or rock music or whatever. And then through just being around a lot of friends who were musicians, or my brother and my cousin, there was always like a guitar around or there was a piano around. So a lot of the way that I've learned how to play most of the instruments I know are not classically trained, other than like the drum lessons I took when I was a kid. A lot of it is just kind of picking up things along the way and learning from the people that I'm with. And then eventually, once I got into college and eventually becoming a teacher, it became more and more difficult to not only find the time to like meet with people and collaborate and play music, but just the space to do it too. To set up a drum set anywhere is difficult because you'll get about 30 minutes before your neighbors start like calling the cops for a noise complaint or things like that. So it kind of fell by the wayside for a long time, and for a good like 8 or 9 years probably, it was something that I would want to do, and I would occasionally maybe like meet up with friends and we would talk about music, or I would go to Guitar Center and play around with things, but it just became something that was not a priority. And about like a year and a half ago, in the beginning of 2018, there was a YouTube channel called Weird Heat that is run by Brian Altano, who's one of the guys who's at IGN, and Max Scoville, who's also at IGN. And their whole pitch for this YouTube channel was that they wanted some place where they were like giving themselves a deadline to do something creative with their creative passion and to not put it off anymore. And that they were going to do something like once a week or once a month and make themselves release something so that they would be getting to their passion and make time for their passion. Yeah. And for whatever reason, it just like really landed with me when that happened. And I had this moment of being like, yeah, I've been itching to do music again, and I should make myself do it. Like I should stop making excuses of there's no time, or I don't have enough resources, or I don't have the right equipment, and just start making it. So I started setting a deadline, and I like secretly told myself, okay, I'm going to make sure once a month I'm putting something out. And I didn't want to advertise it because in the back of my head, I was like, I'm probably not going to do this. I'm probably not going to be able to keep up with it. But eventually, like I put out just an instrumental track and, shared it on my Twitter and my Facebook with no real hopes of it doing anything other than just like scratching that creative itch of I can get some music out there, and I can spend some time in the evenings or on the weekends working on music and making some just instrumental music. And then it was like a week later that the guys who run the Invincible podcast, had announced that they were going to start doing the Oblivion Song podcast, which was Kirkman's other comic. Yeah. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking like, oh, that's so cool. I wish that like I had the time to, write something for them and give them an intro song for the podcast or something like that. But I wouldn't be able to do that in time. And I think as I was telling my wife that, they sent me a message on Twitter and they're like, hey, we really like that song you just used. Can we use it as our intro music for our podcast?
That's amazing.
And I was like, yeah, sure. So I had gone from like, within a week of just feeling good that I'm scratching an itch for me, and it's just like me sitting in my office working on music on my computer and putting it out just for my friends and family, to now connecting with people who are on the other side of the country and having them, give me some shout outs on their podcast, and getting exposed to a whole new group of people on Twitter for making music, which was it was beyond anything that I had anticipated happening. And it very much felt like it was the universe's way of telling me like, hey, good job for getting back to your passions and doing something that you've been wanting to do. And so here's this little reward of, people noticed, and now you should keep doing it. So since then, I've kept to the deadline of on the first Friday of every month, I'll make sure and release a new track, whether it's just like a short couple minute thing or something a little more elaborate, and have done that since March of last year. So I'm just yesterday, because we're recording this on a Saturday, just yesterday I posted my 20th song in a row.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's not something that I think I'm ever looking to make a career out of, because like I've said, the career of a musician is a lot of times, I think, a little unstable, and you're looking for gig to gig, and I really enjoy having some stability, and like I said, I'm really passionate about education as well and being a teacher, and that's something that's super fulfilling in its own way. But it's something that's really nice to have that time where I can, sit and put some headphones on and really be creative and let those kind of energies out.
Yeah, I mean, I hate it when people say this, like, oh, I know what you mean, but I genuinely do know what you mean. I mean, the very
Yeah,
nature of us doing this podcast is that,
yeah,
that itch for me, just being able to sit down and talk to someone and, like, say, put your headphones on and
yeah,
and get
absolutely.
something out there. So what interests me about your music is it's quite varied. So how does that come about? What's your process for, you know, writing a song, or even before that when you come up with something, or a piece of music? Can you talk me through that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for saying that it's varied. I'm constantly worried that I'm like, man, I'm just writing the same type of like electronic. I'm always a little worried about that in the back of my head. So I'm glad that's a piece of feedback. But yeah,
Well, no,
it's
I was flicking through
fun.
your SoundCloud earlier, and I was like, oh, that's a shift. Oh, okay, that's different. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and it probably is because my process very much is dependent on like what type of things I'm listening to during that time when I'm writing, and like a lot of times when I like the first time I'll show my wife whatever song I'm working on, she'll be like, "Oh yeah, I can tell you were listening to this band right now," because she has a good ear into the types of influences that I have and things like that. But it very much comes down to, I listen to a lot of music, obviously, since I enjoy it so much that whatever I'm listening to, if it's striking a chord in me and it really starts to resonate with me, that I just get really passionate about whatever I'm listening to. There's usually it's that I want to emulate that in some way, and it's not always necessarily that I want to make something in that exact same style, but it might be a chord progression or a drum beat or a guitar riff or something like that I want to. I think, and I think it goes back to a lot of the way that I do this, and what I wanted to do with making music was just to kind of prove to myself that I could, because I had always been in other bands, but I had never really made music just by myself. So hearing other music that really like resonated with me and worked with me, I would want to like sit back and be like, I want to see if I can do that. Like I want to see if I can make something that has that same effect that this song is having on me. So it would depend, if I'm listening to something like Nine Inch Nails that's very like kind of angsty and has a little more aggression to it, and I'm like really reacting to that or feeling that when I'm listening to it, it would make me want to challenge myself and be like, can I sit down and make something that has that same kind of feel that makes you feel that's like you're getting that aggression out when you're listening to it and stuff like that. So it's almost always it's some song or some piece of music that triggers something in me that I feel challenged to go and try and create a version of that myself.
Right. That's very interesting. What sort of music, what are your tastes then? Give me a spectrum of what you would listen to, you're driving to work or something.
Sure. And well, I mean, when I started with this, a lot of it was I mentioned Brian Altano on his channel Weird Heat, who he does IGN. He's a musician as well and does a lot of like electronic music, and that was I think I was listening to his album a lot when I first started. And a lot of the times it's video game music as well, because I play a lot of video games, and like I think one of the months that I was working on music, I was listening to or I had just beaten Celeste on the Switch, and the music for that game is just phenomenal. So I would be listening to that on the way to work, or listening to that in my headphones when I'm working after class, and so I would want to go back, and then that month I would spend a lot of that month just like at the piano and trying to write piano chords and progressions that reminded me of the way that some of those ones feel. And then like I said, sometimes it would be something like Nine Inch Nails that I listened to a lot when I was younger, and I would go back to some of those albums and want to emulate that type of feeling. So it's varied from everything from video game music and the more electronic type of stuff that I think is similar to mine, to even like more poppy funk type of stuff. Like there's a band called Chromeo that I'm a huge fan of, that they've had a couple of singles on the radio that's really great. That's more like funk and like 80s kind of pop synth inspired that I've tried to emulate on a few songs, and to even stuff that I remember listening to when I was much younger, like listening to the Beatles because my parents were big fans of those, and I've revisited them when I'm older and kind of see them in a different light and wanting to emulate those. So that's been kind of a struggle for me too, is that I as a musician, I'm not sure if I should try to like stick to one genre and do things that are, there's a lot of people online who find a lot of success doing just 80s synthwave,
Sure.
that type of genre, because it finds an audience that knows what they're expecting. But at the same time, I think what drives me to make music, and the only way that I would be able to keep going through with it, is that I have some source of inspiration that's really resonating with me, and I want to make something like that. And if I had to sit down every month and make something that fit into a box, I think I would struggle a lot more with it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Like, and that I see now that the compliment I paid you about having varied music was accurate. But
Yeah.
so what's the plan then? Like future? What do you hope to do? Give me like a 1 year, 3 year plan for the music. You've got
Sure.
one every Friday, every month. Sorry,
Yeah.
every month on a Friday. But
Yeah, I'm doing once a month. So on the first Friday of the month, I'm releasing music. And when I had first started that, the goal was to finish out the rest of 2018 so I could kind of collect those like 10 or 11 songs as an album and put it out. And so I did that, and then hadn't really set any other goals for music. That was just kind of a milestone that I wanted to hit. And then in January of this year, when I was done with that, I was like kind of scared of not having that. So I was like, well, no, I'm going to do that again then. And I'm going to keep going throughout I don't want this to go away, because it feels great to be able to make music and put it out there and have people, use it for different things and react. And so I had decided I want to do that again for this year. So I'm hoping by December of this year, I've gone through all 12 months and we'll post those as an album again. And then, so that's kind of the short-term goal of getting through the rest of this year, doing the once a month song, and then collect those and publish those out as an album. And then beyond that, like what I've enjoyed the most about this is just like kind of experiences like this, where I've gotten to meet more people because of that, because the music can be used for a podcast or background on a YouTube channel, or like it would be amazing one day to even have it like in a video game if somebody was making it and putting that as background music, since a lot of my inspiration comes from video game soundtracks and things like that. I think ultimately my goal, because like I said, I don't think it's something that I'm really aiming to have be my income or my job, just because I would even worry that might put an added stress onto the process that I would not enjoy and not really find a way to be creative still. So my hope with it is just that I can keep doing it and keep finding people who, for whatever purpose, feel like they can use it for either any kind of content they're creating. Like the description on my SoundCloud, I just have that just says, like, if you're making content and you need music, like, send me a message and I'll be more than happy to, as long as it's got like just a credit or a link back to where they can find me and my music. So if other people see it, they can use it. Because really what I've enjoyed most about this process of releasing the music is meeting people like the guys on the Invincible podcast, meeting you and Ben, and getting to collaborate with other people and help them make other content. I think since I've started, there's around 4 or 5 different podcasts now that have either featured my music as an intro or just as a weekly thing, and it feels great to know that I'm kind of collaborating with other people, helping them create content, and meeting different people from different parts of the world, really. And that's been such a surprising part of this, and it's been such an enjoyable part of this process of releasing music, that's really my goal, is to just keep making music and putting it out in a way that hopefully lends to being able to collaborate with more people and meet more people throughout the rest of however long I can keep doing it.
Yeah, sure. So when I'm really interested in the process still. I'm sorry. I love all that. The context around it is rich and it's lovely.
Sure.
But so you now have 4 weeks to get another song written, right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
deadline, that sort of deadline to your homework is really important. I made a joke
Yeah.
with someone at
Yeah.
work the other week, like I had to write a policy
Uh-huh.
for something, and I said, no, give me a deadline. I need a homework deadline, because otherwise I'm not going
Yeah.
to do it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
where do you start now? Like t t today is your day? You going to start doing some music now, or?
So yeah, I will most likely like when Grayson goes down for a nap, most
Yeah.
likely I will like go into the office, get my headphones on, and I have we have like an electric piano in the spare room, and I have a little MIDI controller that I hook up to my computer to control all the digital instruments. Just because most of the things that I put out are all digital instruments, even from the drums to anything else. So it's a lot of me tinkering away on my computer. So I'll probably go in and, there's always at any given time on my computer, I've got 5 or 6 unfinished projects that I
Right.
started one day because I had an idea. So I, a lot of times just kind of open up those maybe and look over those. Or if there's a specific, like I said, if I had been listening to a specific song or something like that, I might jump in and just try to quickly like emulate the drum beat or emulate, the piano part of it and come up with my own version of it and then kind of build on that throughout the 4 or 5 weeks that I have. And yeah, like you said, that aspect of a deadline is what I think helped me succeed in finishing things and putting them out, because before then I had done that where I would go into the office and I would put my headphones on and just tinker around with music, but it was always like well, that was fun, but it's not done and I don't know when it'll be done, and then I just walk away from it and forget about it. So knowing that like there's been several times where I'll be talking to my wife and she'll be like, are you okay? Are you a little stressed out? And I'm just like, yeah, I just realized next Friday's the first Friday of the month. And so I gotta, I'm just like, that's fine. You can go in there and work on it if you want to. She's like, all right, I'm just going for a minute. And then, yeah, so it's definitely something that it's given me like every now and then I'll get a little bit of the stress about making sure I hit the deadline, but in a very healthy and good way, that it's forcing me to set aside time to dedicate to just going into a room and taking time to put headphones on and isolate myself from any other stress that I have going on and allow myself to be creative in a way that is just kind of safe, where there's you know what I mean? There's no risk really to me going around and trying out different things and
Yeah.
spending time experimenting.
I have to say, understanding wives and partners that are understanding are at the core of all creatives, I
Absolutely.
find.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, obviously,
definitely.
there's people out there who are single and they do very amazing, successful stuff. But in my experience, the ability to turn around and go, can I just go and do that thing for a little bit? And someone turning around and saying, yeah, go do that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's free reign.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't thank my wife enough, especially me kind of starting this and trying to make this part of my life when we're both teachers and we're both relatively new parents. That's something that I can't thank her enough for, and probably don't thank her enough for, is how much she's supported me in just everything that we do, and making it possible for me to be able to have that time to express myself.
How do you know when a song is done? I mean, I know you've got the deadline. We talked about the deadline, but like,
Yeah.
how do you not go back and go, oh, I wish I changed that, or that bit doesn't quite fit for me? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I still do that after I publish them. I don't think I'll ever like have a song where I go back to and listen to it and then feel like, oh yeah, that I nailed that one. Nothing else I could have done there. A lot of times, like I'll have like a weird, like arbitrary, like time amount in my head that I don't want the song to be like 30 seconds, and I don't want it to be, obviously, like I don't want it to be like 8 or 9 minutes long or something like that. So I have like this rough in between a cup, like 2 minutes to 3.5 minutes or something like that, that it should be a decent amount of length, that it should have, in my head, I'll have like it should have a variety of parts. It should feel like this could be a verse or a chorus or something like that. And it very much just comes down to kind of an abstract, like when it sort of feels right and when it feels like it accomplishes whatever it was I had in my head that I set out that I wanted it to do. Like if I wanted it to feel like this particular song, once it starts feeling that way, and once I'm happy with the transitions or the layering of the different instruments, that it is a very abstract thing. Like it's hard for me to put my finger on why sometimes I feel like, okay, it's done and I'm happy with it and I can stop working on it and put it out. But I think that's part of what draws me to the process, is that it is kind of an abstract thing, like especially the nature of the stuff that I do, where it's a lot of it's instrumental, obviously, and there's not vocals, so it's not really always following a structure of typical like verse chorus verse chorus. And it just comes down to, I guess, if I'm feeling happy with it, and if it feels like it's accomplishing the goal that I had kind of set out for it to accomplish at the beginning of is it evoking the feelings that the song I was listening to originally that kind of made me want to make something like this? Is it evoking those same feelings in me when I listen to it? And there's a lot of times when it's like the Thursday before the first Friday, and it's something, and it's close enough, I guess, because I'm out of time and I set this deadline, so I have to put it out.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is just me being, like, I think, overly critical of my own stuff. But yeah, sometimes it comes down to just even like, well, I'm out of time, so guess it's done.
That's cool. The word I feel like you're sort of avoiding is art. Like, that's why I want you to use that word. But maybe you're being sort of bashful about it or something. But like, it's art, man. Like, it should.
Sure, yeah.
Art evokes emotions, and
Yeah.
and you're saying it's sort of this intangible thing. Like, I reckon that's what it is.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense, and it definitely is. And I am always like careful that I don't want to sound too pretentious as somebody
Sure.
who makes like instrumental music that is, played on podcasts and stuff like that. That I know, I have a lot of friends or coworkers or things like that who are very supportive, and they know that, I'm putting out music, but naturally, like, instrumental electronic music, not everyone's cup of tea, and that's like totally normal. So I try not to get too like overly pretentious about it being my artistic expression, but it really is, and it's my chance to be able to do something artistic and fulfill that side of kind of my personality, I guess. But
Don't
yeah,
worry, you're not coming across as pretentious. You're coming across very down to earth, I promise you.
well, that's good.
Okay, so I have one final question, but if there's any more stuff you'd like to talk about, I'm happy to talk about stuff. I mean, I've trawled through your Twitter a little bit and looked at things like you do some Spider-Man cosplay, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Was that just a Halloween thing, or is that thing you do regularly?
No, that was just a Halloween thing. I've always wanted to, like, I'm always very impressed by people who put a lot of work into cosplay. And like I said, Spider-Man was some of the first comics that I read. So when Spider-Man Homecoming came out and started seeing in the trailers and some of the first couple of stills that one of his suits was like the homemade suit that was really just a hoodie and sweatpants and some goggles, I was like, I can afford that. I can definitely put that together. So I'm doing that for Halloween. And so that was a lot of fun getting to put that together, and especially fun getting to go to my class and have my students right around the time that it was, just a few months after Homecoming had come out, getting to wear that at my school and have all the kids react to it was super, super fun too. Even though it was like, I think it was like 89 degrees out on where we were.
And you're in a hoodie and
just sweating underneath the hoodie and sweatpants, but the kids were happy.
That's cool. That's cool. We're my other half and I are going to try cosplay for the first time later this year, and I'm spoilers for anyone that I haven't told you. I'm attempting a Nick Fury cosplay because it's like you said, I can probably do that. That's like black overalls and some white bands and just an eye patch and
yeah, doable, exactly.
So
I know I've always, like I said, I've always wanted to do cosplay, and like I'm a huge Captain America fan and loved Endgame, but I just to entertain myself would look up like, how much would it cost to get like one that's pretty accurate to his in the movies, and then just like immediately I'm shut down, like, nope, can't afford that.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's so impressive when you see these guys guys and girls who've made sort of homemade stuff, and you're like,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
genius that you've come up with that. You've taken a bottle cap and a spanner and all these other things and strapped them together, and suddenly you're in some android outfit that obviously I recognize.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the talent that's in some of those people is really incredible.
So bringing together two things you just said about being a big Captain America fan and talent, I also spotted on your Twitter some figurine customization.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm obviously like I'm very into all the nerd culture stuff, and Marvel and the MCU has been like a big thing that kind of got me back into comics as well. Even so, yeah, I definitely collect different figures and just kind of slowly buy ones over the years that kind of catch my eye or that I'm a big fan of the franchise. And recently they released the Captain America Endgame figure that came with the hammer and everything, and I decided to just do a little bit of customizing and like cut the shield in half to make it look a little more accurate and some weathering. So that's I've always kind of been interested in making like, miniatures and doing that like kind of crafting of painting and stuff like that. It's just another thing that requires a lot of time and supplies, and it's something that I'd love to do more of in the future, but I've just I think barely dipped my toe in that kind of realm here and there.
Very cool though, yeah, that's good stuff. I think there's quite a lot of times people sort of sit around and go, God, it would be really cool if I had X figure or this, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not available.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's kind of where it comes. It's like the Invincible figurines that have come out.
Yeah.
Been amazing, but that's only in recent times.
Yeah, exactly. I know there's been several times where I've like thought to myself, looking at like if we're at the store and I see like an Iron Man figure, I'm like, could I change that to be Robot from Invincible? And I'm like, no,
Nice.
I can't do that.
There's a guy on Twitter called Bo Pilgrim. I don't know if you've encountered him in our little community, but that's kind of his whole thing is figurine
Oh, nice.
customization. And I think we learnt about him and encountered him through again the Invincible podcast because he was doing some Mark Grayson stuff. He might have even taken like a Nightwing figurine or something and made an Invincible,
Okay.
something like that. So
Yeah.
that was very cool.
Yeah, I'll have to look him up.
Right, Wyatt, my last question, the question I ask everyone on this Just Chatting podcast, is it's important to me because I believe that people should find joy in life. So what is it
Yeah.
that brings you great joy in life?
So first, I think the easiest answer to that is obviously my family and my son. Like becoming a dad has been the best experience I think I've had in life, and he's such a constant and consistent source of just joy in a way that I didn't really know that I was missing in my life or that I would ever really have in my life. So that's I think the easiest answer and maybe the more cliche answer, but definitely the easiest answer to say. And then I mean a lot of what we've talked about over this show, my two kind of passions in life are sort of split between teaching and educating and getting to connect with young kids and help them learn and grow and spend my days getting to do that, and then having that more creative side as well and being able to go and experiment and make music for people and getting to meet them through that music and getting to get to know others who enjoy it and are able to use it for other things is such especially over the past year and a half has been such an exciting thing too, that those are I think the three like things that jump to mind immediately anyways.
It's a good list. It's a very good list. Wyatt, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for
It's
your
been
time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been so great to be on. Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, you take care. Have a good Saturday.
You too.